You can always spot his paintings because of his style and the colours that he used. I mean, instantly recognisable, I think.
You can't pigeonhole him. He's unique. And I think on that basis, that's why he deserves recognition.
I think he's got that classic quality about his work, which needs to have more exposure.
He did sort of powerful pieces that I think will last the test of time.
Very talented, very underappreciated at the moment.
He should have had much, much more recognition.
Don't think he got the recognition he deserved whilst he was alive.
Superb with composition. I love his composition, the way he actually puts the pictures together.
His compositions are just beautiful.
They were incredibly accomplished works of art.
I thought they were great.
I would rate him as a slightly undiscovered master.
He was probably the best artist that you've never heard of.
I love him. That was brilliant.
I was born in Belgium.
Nicholas Simington was born in Antwerp in 1930 to Irish parents. At the time, his father David was on secondment to General Motors. Nicholas was only months old when the family returned to Ireland, setting up home in Drogheda, some 30 miles north of Dublin.
I used to live at 53 Scarlet Street.
As you got to the bottom of Sandyford Terrace was a garage on the right hand side where I got a guinea pig, much to my mother's displeasure. Of course there was a dry toilet and the tomatoes used to grow out of that. All the right hand side was called Smith's Field, was a big field, and we used to play football, and the curate from St. Peter's, I think it was St. Peter's, used to play footy with the rest of us.
He enjoyed a happy childhood in that historic town, revisiting it on numerous occasions in later life to show his family the site of the family cottage, long since demolished and replaced by a modern house. In 1940, his parents took the extraordinary step of leaving neutral Ireland and moving the family to war-torn London after his father had obtained a position in the British Civil Service.
My father had come over to England to get a job. That was before the Second World War. And stayed with his cousin.
Known as Uncle Frank, an elderly second cousin, Frank Kelly, was an internationally acclaimed expert and designer of period costumes for screen and stage.
He was an authority on historical costume, and I've got the little paintings of designs for costumes in films and plays. One of them's for Cyrano de Bergerac, which was a play in London. Then, of course, we got information or a letter from Laura Kelly, Auntie Laura, in London to say that my mother should come quickly. Auntie Laura was, I think, afraid that he might have been going off with some other women or something. So she sold off our house for bugger all.
Yeah.
We came over and ended up in London during the Blitz in 1940 when I was 10. During the blackout, I used to go ahead and they called me. I remember I walked into a lamppost.
Over the following 5 years, the family made several moves, eventually settling in Scotland.
We stayed in a pub for a bit, Macatammany's, in Ireland, and the boy in the house had collected these comics and he gave me them.
At the end of the war, his father David took up another civil service position, this time in Egypt.
And then when in 1944, when they went to Cairo, I always say they put me away.
When his parents went off to Egypt, Daddy was sent to a boarding school just outside Oxford, the Salesian College. And I know, because he talked about it many times, that he hated it. He hated almost every minute of it.
He enjoyed the art classes, but I never really heard him talk about anything else he enjoyed.
At school, there was an art class, and he got a lot of positive feedback from the teachers who said he had a talent. And those were the only moments that sort of made the Salesian College bearable by his telling, anyway.
I've always enjoyed painting and drawing from the time I was a child. I won a lot of prizes at school.
He wanted then to go on straight from finishing school to art college, but his parents, who were very strict, forbade it, said there was no money in it, no future in it. He had to get a proper, sensible job.
When he was a teenager, those were the days when you did what your parents told you. They said there's no future in art, and he wasn't allowed to go. And a careers officer suggested he became a draftsman. He said, that's drawing.
And in the end, he ended up studying accounting.
He then spent every waking minute he had from that point to the point when he got to art school, trying to get from there to there.
In 1959, Nicholas's life changed dramatically when he met newly qualified schoolteacher Barbara Preston at a dance in Manchester.
After I left college, I went to college in Didsbury, Manchester. I shared a flat with a friend I'd made at college, and we saw an advert in the library, I think, for a club, the 18 plus. There was a dance one evening, and the men spent the evening propping up the bar, and Nick arrived very late. And he did dance. He danced first of all with my friend, and then he danced with me, and then we made a date for the following Tuesday. And when I told my friend, she said, he's married, you know. I said, no, I don't think so. She said, well, he came in talking about painting the nursery. He'd been helping his sister and her husband paint the nursery for their first child. However, perhaps I was naive, but I thought, well, he wouldn't have asked me on a date if he was married. So we met the following Tuesday. He suggested we met at the clock tower in Didsbury, which was convenient. Yes, it was for him. He lived about 10 yards away. I lived considerably further away, but and we were supposed to be going to the pictures, but it was a lovely warm evening, and he said, it's too hot to go and sit in the pictures. I'll take you to this club I belong to. So that was the Wild Geese Club. It's a club for Irish people who are away from their home country.
I was always proud of being Irish.
2 years later, they married. The newlyweds soon swapped their home in Manchester for Carluke, a small town just outside Glasgow, where Nicholas had taken up a promotion as a cashier with the giant electrical firm AEI.
And he went to evening classes. When I first met him, he was going to evening classes. To art classes. But it was only when we moved to Scotland that he went to night classes at Glasgow School of Art and got a really professional tutor. And his tutor there, William Crosby, he encouraged Nick to go full time.
Nicholas was now 38 years of age.
Nick was working for AEI at the time and wasn't very happy.
He'd been out in industry from the time he sort of left school, and he had to do his national service.
He didn't like the job he was in, and he had several jobs. It was really a square peg in a round hole every time.
I always wanted to go to art school.
I saw this advert in the paper. They were looking for art teachers, and they were offering a full grant to do the 4 years at Glasgow School of Art. So I was working, and by that time we'd been married for about 7 years and no family had come along. So I said to him, why don't you do it? It's what you've always wanted, and I'll earn the money while you're doing that. So that's what he did. He applied and got in.
Technically, he he learned a lot. Said it was always, like 90% graft and then 10% the kind of ideas or the inspiration or talent. So a lot of time was spent developing technical skills, so improving, his ability with the oil and the canvas and the brushes and working those things through. I suppose that gave him the launching pad to then go off and find his own voice. So yes, I think it was a magical time for him,
And he always said they were the best 4 years of his life.
Getting the opportunity to go back, be creative. He said it was the best. He said it was like Never Neverland. He said it was the best experience of his life.
And of course, it was during those 4 years that both boys were born. He'd only been at the college about 4 months when I was pregnant. So it was good for both of us.
Nicholas graduated with a diploma in art in 1972.
His first sale was a painting he entered in a competition in Scotland, and the paintings were for sale. So I remember going at the end of the exhibition and seeing this red spot by Nick's painting. I think it sold for the grand sum of £30.
And a couple of years later, he, Barbara, and their 2 young sons, Aidan and Liam, moved south to Norfolk.
It was 2 things. One, Nick had been contemplating it. He thought if we moved somewhere nearer to London, there might be a chance of a London gallery taking him on. We came to Norfolk because he had family here. His brother and sister-in-law were here. And what really gave us a push was we found out our house in Scotland was going to be compulsorily purchased. So we had to move anyway. So we thought, well, we might as well move in a big way.
He was to devote the rest of his life to painting, while Barbara supported the family by teaching.
He taught in Scotland for the 2 years, and then he taught part-time for his brother down here. By that time, the boys were school age, or just about. Liam was just about to start school, so I think I said, well, you paint and I'll work, I'll teach. It was a struggle in the early days because in the early days, he really didn't sell much.
An early high point of his emerging career was a summer show at the prestigious Serpentine Art Gallery in London, which championed new ideas in contemporary art and provided an invaluable platform for emerging artists. In 1982, Nicholas's work was selected by John Lessor to be shown in the summer show he was curating.
It was John Lessor who said to Nick when he came to see the gallery, to see the studio and see Nick's paintings, he said that he couldn't get the images out of his mind, that he'd looked at lots of artists' slides, but the ones that kept coming back into his head were Nick's.
Over the following 3 weeks that summer, Nicholas's distinctive canvases were seen by thousands of visitors. Nicholas Simington carried on painting in his studio behind his cottage for the next 35 years.
He was exhibiting in all around Norfolk, and he had several shows, quite a lot of shows down in London as well.
And his work was bought by private collectors from the United States, Canada, Australia and Italy. Nicholas continued painting into his 80s and was delighted when the magazine Artists and Illustrators shortlisted him for the Artist of the Year award. Ill health eventually forced him to hang up his paintbrushes and put away his sketch pads at the age of 86. He died at his home in Old Buckenham in 2020, aged 89.
He was really driven to paint.
It was absolutely central to his being.
He had an idea. It would be, boys, can you go out into the garden because I'm going to take some photographs of you, and whatever you do, don't smile.
I just think he had this compulsion.
He never went anywhere without a sketchbook or a camera or something.
If he had a day when he didn't go into the studio, he felt guilty.
He was always sketching of an evening when we came back. When he came back in, he'd sit in front of the telly and sketch. And
He just felt it was what he had to do.
there was nothing else in many ways.
If he saw anything he liked, again, it would always be, can you stop the car, Barbara, and go back about half a mile back. There was a field and there was something I liked there. I'll take a photo of that. That might work for a painting.
We would be in the middle of a lay-by, broken down, the bonnet up on the car, facing a 250-mile journey home, and he'd be worrying about how the toes go on his latest sketch, and that would be the only thing obsessing him, and everything else went on around him, and he was oblivious to it.
And he just seemed to have an endless supply of ideas.
At the time when you're children, it just seems normal. When you grow up and meet people who've had different experiences, you realise how lucky you were in many ways, because you see the world through those artistic eyes, and you learn values that are not about money, not about commercialism. They're about the soul of things and the feelings that you get from things.
Because his values, his whole creative ethos, very non-materialistic. He encouraged us to be creative in every way possible. I loved it.
It was about this emotion that he was creating, this beautiful works of art.
Got into the Glasgow School of Art. And there you learn how to reproduce what you see and get the technical side of painting. After I realized that that wasn't all I wanted to do. I wanted to do more than that, and I thought, what is my aim?
He tried to find his voice, and then he did talk about trying to create what he used to refer to as a magic presence, and that's what he was always going for.
Although he was trained at Glasgow, he went out onto his own set of rules with painting.
I wanted to reproduce things that I admired in other painters, and these were, I found, had all got something in common. And I thought they had this, children had the same thing. They were able to do, because they had no inhibitions, they would create a magical presence, something that was magical.
He talked about that kind of spirit or that feeling, and that's what he was trying to create.
Didn't have to be absolutely realistic.
He didn't do photorealism.
Most of the people you can recognize, the reason you can recognize them is they do something to reality, that they have their way of reproducing reality, and that gives it an individual quality. It's not reproducing like a camera. El Greco, that one of his, what he did was he elongated figures. That also gives them a special look. If you think of all the greats, that's how they all look the same. All Cézannes look the same. I mean, although they're of different things, they all look the same.
Superb with composition. I love his composition, the way he actually puts the pictures together. There's a full mat he uses. He's very bold with upright lines and horizontal lines. That gives him the composition base with the figures in front.
His compositions are just beautiful.
Also, you have in that his symmetry work. Everything is held on parallel lines and vertical lines, so you can't move out of the space that is created.
Sometimes it means that where you have an object on a table on the left hand side, you might think, well, there's something wrong here, something quite wrong, so you shift it to the right hand side, and that does it. So you alter your design to get the arrangement that gives you that.
Where would most people put vase of flowers on a table? In the centre.
Yes.
But Nick actually takes it and lays it on the edge for the composition purpose. We get
Straight
the
lines,
horizontal
yes.
lines and the vertical lines,
Yes.
and that just sits there. Beautiful piece of thinking. Sitting at the table, sitting on the chair, the square routines of the chair and the picture behind, again bringing that formality of rectangles and straight lines and vertical lines.
I start off with the thing that inspires me, and I think, right, I could do something with that. I get the, as you do with the sunset, if something triggers, I think that's fantastic. I could, the design and the colour, and instantly I have a picture in my head, an idea. I spend a long time in simplifying it.
His inspiration comes from small, simple things like the girl brushing her hair. We were in a restaurant having lunch one day, and he was enamoured by the owner, who was a young lady, but she was in an apron, she had spiky hair, and he wanted to paint her. So he immediately took some photographs.
And I will simplify. I'll do maybe half a dozen or a dozen variations on that to see which design achieves what I want, the magical presence.
With every picture, there are a lot of drawings that go into them that people don't know about. They just see the end product. But he works out the compositions, he works out the formula of the faces, and then he paints his pictures. These are little sketches that Nick would do as preparation for an oil painting. They're small vignettes, but they are studies of figures, how he'd like them actually to come out on the paintings. So they're double-sided, as you can see. So each one is worked, his mind is working all the time on how to prepare the composition. The same with this one. We have a series of portraits, so he's getting the angle right and also the expression right. Then again we have the vignettes at the bottom, and we can turn over again, and there's a whole series of small sketches. This is his mind working before he actually starts to paint.
You have to simplify and not get caught up in too much detail. I mean, that kills it. You just go for the feeling.
It was about expressing a human feeling. He talked about that kind of spirit or that feeling, and that's what he was trying to create.
He does so many different things. He does still lifes, he does landscape, he does the figure studies. I'm most interested in figure studies.
People fascinated him, and a lot of his paintings were people.
Some of the figures are quite mask-like. We can't see their eyes. They're kind of just voids. But it's just, I love it. It's great.
3 figures in a picture. They all 3 engage you. You think, what are they looking at? What are they saying to each other? What's happening down below? Because it's obviously a first floor window. We have the shadow here of a door maybe, and I think that brings you again to having a conversation with the 3 people.
And when he has a group of figures, there's a dynamic going on which you don't quite know. So it's up to you to try and formulate your own story around each picture. Because somebody will be looking out at you, somebody will be looking off to the side, and you have to work out in your own mind what's gone on, what's happening.
That epitomises part of Nick's thinking and work, that you have 2 characters. One is looking directly at you, and the other, the male, is looking at the lady. But that then brings us into a triangle, because you are suddenly involved in that picture. The lady's looking at you, you're looking at the lady, you're looking at the man. There is a conversation piece that is running between the 3 of you. And that's the beauty of Nick's work, that he brings you into his paintings. Same principle. We actually have two figures reflected in the mirror, standing in the doorway. Are they having a conversation with a girl who's got her back to you? So you're drawn into it, the picture, from both angles. Why has she turned away? Is she looking in the mirror? She's not combing her hair, but is she looking at the other two people? So there's always a conversation in Nick's work to be had with the figures that are in there. So you concentrate on those two figures only. I think it's brilliant.
I love them. They're just brilliant. There's something about them, because the story in them isn't obvious. They intrigue me. I think they're brilliant.
He didn't receive the recognition we thought he should.
There are lots of painters who have not had the recognition they deserve.
Like Vermeer and Van Gogh. It wasn't during their lifetime that they were discovered, when fashions were different. It was latterly, and people then could appreciate the qualities.
I mean, I think Vermeer was discovered 200 years after his death.
There have been so many artists who have not been recognised in their own time, and who've died paupers.
But the one thing you have with those artists, exactly like Nick, their dedication to carry on painting. He was never put off by not having that recognition of turning out good work.
Much like Bob Dylan played what he wanted to play, and if the audience came along with him, that's fine, and if they didn't, they didn't. He painted what he wanted to paint. It was powerful stuff. He wasn't a commercial painter. He didn't paint dogs on velvet cushions or chocolate box covers.
It's not twee commercial art.
He stuck to what he wanted to paint. He had his own ideas, and he wasn't going to paint fashionable things.
A person of single mind, that he would stay by his traditions and paint that way.
He stuck at what he wanted to do, stuck to his principles, while the world changed around him.
I think if he'd gone to art college 5 or 10 years earlier and graduated about the same time as David Hockney, he might have had a better chance, because I think galleries were willing to take a chance on unknown artists then. And by the time he qualified, I think the economic climate had changed.
The art market turned into a commodities market in the late 70s, and it became about buying fashionable names, the whole Jeff Koons and all that stuff, and then you get on to all the conceptual art, and he didn't dismiss that. He engaged with it, and he thought about abstraction, and there's an element of abstraction, but it was about expressing a human feeling in a kind of classical composition.
And because he was a little bit more challenging, you had to wait for the people who wanted to see that on it.
People want stuff that looks good, that goes with their wallpaper. And a lot of people who had the taste didn't have the money, and a lot of people who had the money didn't have the right taste. So
I would say 70% of them don't understand them.
They didn't quite get it.
But the 30% that do absolutely love them.
So I think it was frustrating for him. It's not true to say that he didn't care. He wanted to be recognised, but he also didn't want to compromise on the quality of the work that he was putting out. As it turned into this commodities thing, a lot of people were just interested in investing in art that they saw as a commercial investment.
Should have had much, much more recognition. I think that comes really from the promotional side.
It was like a dichotomy. He wanted, in the abstract, absolutely to be recognised, to be successful, etc. But he equally was not interested in doing the things that a more person who was focused on that as their main goal would do, because all he wanted to do was paint.
It's quite ruthless. I mean, you get knocked down an awful lot approaching galleries.
He was too busy thinking about creating his next humdinger, as he used to call them, his next masterpiece.
So marketing, promoting, etc. he relied on other people. He had good friends, good family who would do what they could. But the person, he wasn't a natural marketer. He didn't play the game, and he didn't go to the right garden parties, and he didn't put in the time on the promotion because, quite understandably, his passion was art and he wanted to paint. So I think what he would have wanted was for somebody to come along and say, this is the greatest work I've ever seen. I'm going to put £1 million into promoting you and making you a huge success. And for it to happen, he absolutely wanted it to happen.
He should have been represented by a major London gallery in his career, and I think that would have put him in a different direction for notoriety.
If he was shown in the right place, he would get greater recognition.
He had his fans and they loved what he did and they could feel it.
He obviously had a very strong following, people who really liked his work.
There were many people who were really passionate about Daddy's work. There were many collectors saying things like, you know, why on earth your father isn't internationally renowned is beyond me. I have his paintings on every wall of my house and they bring me joy every day.
I remember one time at an exhibition, and I was with him, and someone came up, looked at one of his paintings of these twins, and she just thumped her chest and she said, it gets me right here. And you know, that's what he was, I think that's what he was trying to create, something that gave you a feeling and had that magic presence that made you feel something, moved you in some way.
Shortly after he died, a fella came to try to look to buy another of his works. And we showed him the studio. We said, would you like to see the studio? He was like it was like a child at Christmas. He said, this is the studio where he painted. His work has meant so much to me.
I think when you see people's reaction to people who appreciate it, you can see that it does hit home, and people get that, see that, feel that magical presence.
I would rate him as a slightly undiscovered, nearly old master. They were incredibly accomplished works of art.
Nick's work is very special in many ways. He's the master of what I call mid-tone painting. His colour palette is, he never uses strong colours like vermilion or strong blues or cadmium yellows. It's always that mid-range.
You can always spot his paintings because of his style and the colours that he used. Instantly recognisable, I think.
The temptation to put a bright piece of paint in the middle of a picture or a touch of red, as Constable used to do, Nick refrained from doing that, and I admire him for it.
His style was so unique.
You can't pigeonhole him. He's unique. And I think on that basis, that's why he deserves recognition. So, yeah, I think that's where I'd put him, just on his own, out on a limb, being unique, being Nick Simington.
I love them. I love them. They're just brilliant.
Do you think he deserves to be remembered, to be recognised?
Absolutely. His work is outstanding.
I don't think he got the recognition he deserved whilst he was alive, which is a great pity. I think if he was shown in the right place, he would get greater recognition. I think he's got that classic quality about his work, which needs to have more exposure.
And I think what he's done is created work that is timeless, that doesn't fit a fashion, but that does mean it will probably last longer and is waiting to be discovered.
So important for us. He kind of, I think that artistic.
Oh, that was lovely.
No, it might happen at any time.
Okay, well, we can work around it.
Okay.
We can work around it. No problem.
It's one of his mad alarm clocks that he bought it. It never told the right time and it randomly goes off. The alarm randomly goes off.
I've got you.
Beautifully eccentric.